Green cards from Modern Horizons 3.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
Hey, I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our Patreon supporters out there. Thank you to the Durdle Maniacs. If you want to be a Durdle Maniac, go to patreon.com/eternaldurdles and help support the channel. It keeps things going. It keeps things updated. Thanks so much for watching. On with the show.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how's it going, man?
Zach, I swear, if Sensei's of the Magus of the Sensei's Top was in green, dude, it would be in my deck.
Would you play it in green? Okay.
I'd play green. Dude, if you told me that I had to put a trap in the play on turn one every turn of the game just so I could... Unfortunately, what? Are you telling me that there's no Magus of the Sensei's Top in the green cards we're about to cover?
Yeah, unfortunately, there is just no Magus of the Sensei's Divining Top. However...
Oh, dude, I'm sorry. I got so busy, dude. I'm sorry. I'm so busy. I'm sorry. I got to go. I got stuff I got to do. I'm sorry. I'm so busy.
Well, let's start with Birthing Ritual, which is a 1 and a green for an enchantment that says at the beginning of your end step, if you control a creature, look at the top 7 cards of your library. Then you may sacrifice a creature. If you do, put a creature card with mana value X or less from among those cards onto the battlefield, where X +1 is the sacrifice creature's mana value. Put the rest on the bottom of your library in random order. That is such a weird way to do that effect.
Yeah, they're really hedging so that you can never miss.
Yeah.
Or you can never get punished.
You can rarely miss. Yeah. Which I appreciate. If you're going to sacrifice a creature, then only look at 7 cards and whiff. That's rough.
Nah, man. Get punished, man. Like, have some risk.
Build your deck so that you don't whiff, right? Like that's how I would look at it.
It's like, hey, do you want to not have to, suffer any consequences of your actions? Here you go.
Yeah. This card's not going to see like major play anywhere in Legacy. I think it's a nod to Birthing Pod for Modern. I think it'll see play in Modern. But it is an interesting effect. And I look forward to seeing somebody completely prove me wrong.
Yeah, look at it this way, man. This is another, you put this in a play on turn 2, you pitch all your cards to Allosaurus Rider, and then you have a Grizzlebrand in your top 7, and we're off to the races. But yeah, I mean, I think the problem with this card is that we already have all of these other really powerful ways to cheat shit into play. Yeah. So it's just like where in Modern you only have so many options. In Legacy, you have all of the busted shit. So it's like, okay, you have to not be playing Natural Order. You have to not be playing Reanimate. You have to have a reason that you would need to put in something bigger that's not off a Green Sun Zenith target.
Yep.
There's just like, you would need a reason to be in this instead of just show and tell your shit into play. Yeah, it's like, there's just so many other options that are already powerful in Legacy that this might just be pushed out because this is targeted for Modern, and then this is one of those things where it's like trying to give you a scaled down version of the Legacy stuff. So,
yeah. I agree. All right. Next up is an uncommon for 2 mana. It's an instant. It's called Collective Resistance. It's escalate green mana, so that allows you to pay for it. Pay this mana cost extra, like the green extra, and you can do extra modes on this card. So it's choose one or more. Destroy a target artifact, destroy a target enchantment, or target creature gains hexproof indestructible. I only bring this up because it could be a card that I could see putting into Infect in maybe the sideboard, or maybe like main deck. Be like, you know what, I've got this thing. I can answer, a Chalice on 1 or something like that with this. And then it also has a little bit of modality to use for other things. That's the only reason why I want to talk about this card, unless you have other reasons why you think this card would ever see play.
I mean, Pick Your Poison does something similar for 1 mana. You have all of the disenchant effects that give you the first 2 modes, plus also have something else going on. So, like, there's the option where you have, I think Wilt is just a disenchant with Cycle. You have a bunch of alternative ways that destroy artifact or enchantment is just inherently tacked onto other cards, and you don't need to have a dedicated naturalize effect. So, yeah, it's like if you're playing this card, I think you have to be looking at that third line of text as like something that would be meaningful to you. I would never play a creature in my deck because that would make me cringe. So this is all you, my guy. You can collectively resist.
Creatures so cringe now. That's that. I agree. The only reason you would ever play this card is because you want that third part to have text, but you also want the flexibility of the other 2 slots in case that's relevant. Eternal Durdles is sponsored by Tales of Adventure. You can go to toamagic.com, use the code Durdles for 5% off your order, and you're going to get that whole order in one package. No more waiting for 5 or 6 or 12 packages to show up at your door so that you can finish your deck. toamagic.com, code Durdles for 5% off, and you'll be directly supporting the show. I'm going to murder this name, so let me try. I know you have a different way of saying it than I do. Eladamri, Korvecdal.
Yeah, man, your syllabics are so strange. It's Eladamri.
Korvecdal.
We know it's Eladamri. He's just a known character, so that's
Eladamri.
not strange. Yeah, Eladamri. Korvecdal.
It's the second part that I'm having the most trouble with, honestly. It's not as Muramartica Daishina Koldakar or anything, like it's a lot harder to pronounce.
That's easy. That one's easy.
All right, this is a legendary creature, elf warrior for 2 green and 1 colorless. It's a 3/3, so it doesn't get hit by Orcish Bowmasters. And it says you may look at the top card of your library anytime. Hey, this could be your Sensei's Divining Top, Phil.
It says you may cast creature cards. Come on, why would I ever? First off, this is a creature, and then you may cast creature cards.
Yeah, let me finish reading it though, so we got the whole thing. So you can look at the top card of your library at any time. You can cast creatures from the top of your library, and then you can tap it and 1 green to tap 2 untapped creatures you control. Reveal a card from your hand or the top of your library. If you reveal a creature card this way, put it onto the battlefield. Activate only during your turn. So this is interesting because it's kind of an answer. Like, look, Elves is still going to be not great, but this doesn't draw cards, and it has that glimpse of nature kind of effect going on. So I think that's interesting, and it might allow, until Orcish Bowmasters leaves the format, it might allow Elves to be somewhat of a deck.
This has a lot of good things going for it in that, it is a card advantage tool. It also leverages it so that your fetches actually can grant you some amount of information. But the other side too, how often is your fatty, your Craterhoof Behemoth stuck in your hand, and you're like, all right, well, this is a Gaia's Cradle, a very thick Gaia's Cradles away from ever getting out of my hand, and this one just lets you cheat into play for 3 mana. So I mean, not 3 mana, for 3 creatures and a green, which should be fine. But also, there is a world where you could theoretically spam off the top of your deck because there's a bunch of elves that let you untap your elves.
Yeah.
So even though this says green tap 2 other creatures, depending on what creatures are in your deck, you could untap this multiple times and then do this multiple times over the course of a turn. I don't know how often you would have to do that, other than if you can play creature spells off the top of your deck, if you're playing shit like Heritage Druid, that you would just be able to do it anyway. But between Eladamri and Nettle Sentinel untapping every time you tap a creature, and if you have a way to untap this thing, and then your Nettle Sentinels will untap naturally, you could see a snowball effect happening.
It could get weird. Well, there's Wirewood Symbiote and stuff.
But Wirewood Symbiote, there's Queer Ranger, there's a whole bunch of ways to do all that different stuff.
All kinds of shenanigans.
This
it's a big brain card.
I think it would actually be interesting if, when people were cutting the Glimpse of Natures from the deck because of Bowmaster, and it being a problem, I would be curious to see if there's a world where you just, let's look at the deck, let's look at where Glimpse of Nature was. What if some number of those Glimpse of Nature were just replaced with this Eladamri, which is also a Green Sun Zenith target, right? So I know that Beast Whisperer was Glimpse of Nature on a creature that you could Green Sun for, but this is sort of doing something similar, except it's not actually drawing you cards. But if you're mostly,
it's not drawing cards, right? And that's the biggest issue.
Right.
Yeah.
But also, the other thing too is that you do have ways to manipulate the top of your deck with Elvish Visionary too. So like if you have a land on top, you're like, okay, I'll play this Elvish Visionary, I'll draw the card, look at the next card, and you can do that. Like there's a bunch of different ways. This is doing a lot of tactical implications for like what that deck was doing, and it's solving problems of like, okay, it's green sendable, B, it's an elf, C, it like doesn't have the problem of drawing cards the way that like Glimpse was getting punished and then a team is fired down. And if you were already looking for some amount of slots to play Legolas's quick reflexes.
Oh yeah, okay.
No, you already were playing natural order, but like I imagine the deck would play some amount of Legolas's quick reflexes. And Legolas's quick reflexes also works with this card because if you quick reflexes this card, then every time it taps to put something else into play, you're doming something for 3, right?
Yeah.
That's a lot better. So like now you're already incentivized to play that card, but this thing has its own tap effect outside of combat, which could be really cool. So like, I mean, I'm not an elves guy. I don't have Gaia's Cradles that I'm looking to sleeve up anytime soon. But if elves players were looking for, what's a reason to pick up your deck again and try something new, I think Eladamri has enough going on that it's worth giving it a shot.
This is enough to me to say that the second best archetype to come out of this format as far as like cards that were given to it. This one card puts elves in second place behind Cloudpost as far as things I can immediately be like, oh, this deck got a leg up thanks to this set.
Yeah, there's the downside of like this thing itself needs to tap, so it has to untap.
Has to live.
It does have, it has to live. It has summoning sickness, but between Legolas's quick reflexes, and also the fact that this theoretically does do something on the turn it comes into play, where if you go elf on turn 1, right, this is a theoretically a turn 2 play, but even if it's not, if it's any turn beyond that, then if you get any amount of creatures off the top of your deck, like if it draws a card or two. Like, that's already not nothing. And then it threatens to do all of the shit that it would do if it untaps. So it becomes a problem immediately.
And like a Heritage Druid would be like bonkers with this card.
Right, exactly. So between Wirewood Symbiote and Legolas's quick reflexes as a ways to protect this card, it's like if they have to point removal at something, like they're going to have to point removal at the Wirewood Symbiote, not this thing. And in which case this survives. And then if you have 1 mana, then they would have to respect quick reflexes. So I think that there's enough contextual with this card that like it's just gonna be pretty cool, and right, but also like I don't see it as any other home other than exactly old elves.
Yeah, elves.
Right?
Yeah. All right, next card is Fanatic of Rhonas. It is a 1 and a green for a snake druid creature. That is a 1/4. It can tap for a green mana. If Ferocious is involved, it can tap for 4 green mana. Activate only if you control a creature with 4 power greater. Okay, so just that's Ferocious. And then it also has Eternalize for 4 mana, so you can turn into a black zombie that's a 4/4. Once that enters the battlefield and goes through a turn, it will Ferocious itself at that point. I don't think that this is a card that like Elves wants to play, but 4 mana is just a lot of mana. I just don't know. I look at this and I'm like, man, 4 mana is just so much. Is there anywhere that like flipping this around, maybe playing like Aloran or something? I just don't know. Like this card looks interesting to me, and like I said, 4 mana is a lot of mana.
So what do you want to spend the mana on?
I don't know. I have no idea.
I think that's that's the crux. Like it's not like looking and being like, okay, where does this thing slot in? It's what deck would want this kind of boost of mana.
For sure.
Like, what is the actual thing that you're trying to
do? Maybe it's a
like,
deck that plays those giant ass Eldrazi, dude.
Yeah, I mean the thing is, 4 green isn't really it can't cast the colorless stuff, so it would have to be the
I'm talking to the big boys, right?
Right. If you're in that space though, you're probably like if you're in like Cloud Post, you want you don't want the crop rotation, so you don't want this.
Yeah.
So like I mean, it needing to go with creatures, it's like, all right, is this like is this like the green based initiative deck, and then something there? I mean, personally, I think like a 2-drop mana dork, it implies that you need a 4-power creature to actually pay this thing off, which means that if you cast this on 2 and then you don't have you would have to commit a 4-power creature, which then means that whatever amount of mana that was, then you undo it and you get this amount of mana. But then if you're doing that, then those cards need to there's just so many hoops to jump through to like make this thing work, even though it's a lot of mana up front. And there's also not any if you're playing something where you have a creature with power 4 or greater, whatever that creature is probably just doing enough on its own to warrant the slot in your deck that you don't need this sort of mana boost. Now, I don't know, right? Because this thing not only itself is a creature, but it's also saying in order to do the awesome thing, you need another creature. And why would I ever have a creature in my deck? So, I am not the target audience.
Yeah,
but
fair.
For tap 4, add 4 is a big deal. So, if somebody finds a home for it, sweet, you did good. It will not be me, and I don't expect this to show up. But I won't be surprised if it is, because obviously it's a powerful effect. But
yeah, I just looked at it and I was just like, God, that's so much mana. All right. Next on to Monstrous Vortex for its enchantment for 3 and 1 green. It says whenever you cast a creature with power 5 or greater, discover X, where X is the spell's mana value. This is the card that I was like, oh, maybe like Cloudpost would play this. Like you've already got all these giant Eldrazi. Like, whoops, I hit another one. Maybe that's a little too win more. It just seems like that if any deck wants to play it, it's that deck.
Yeah, I don't have much on this card because it's just not something that I would ever even think about experimenting with. Yeah. So like, I'll let you have this one.
I think I was high on the glue that is like all these Eldrazi, and I saw this and I was like, Discover is pretty amazing, especially if you cast like an 8 mana creature and you flip over a Reality Smasher, even like that's just like pretty good. So I don't know. I looked at this and I was like, if the Eldrazi deck wants to splash a color, I don't know what color that is. It's probably not green specifically. And we went over Corrupted Crossroads, which doesn't work with any of this stuff. It just the Discover is a weird thing that like when you're pairing with something that big. I'm like, can you figure out a way to like be like, oh, I could have consistently like end the game a turn after I cast this? I honestly don't think that this is like, go out and like alter some copies of this, Phil. Like, if you're a Cloudpost player on the level that Phil plays Miracles, right? This is not the card that's like going to change your deck around. But it is an interesting looking card, and I 4 mana seems like a lot. But in the decks that like want a card like this, like 4 mana is probably 2 mana, So that's kind of where my head was with that. Let's move on to Primal Prayers. Primal Prayers is a 4 mana enchantment that's 2 and 2 green. When it enters the battlefield, you get 2 energy, and you may cast creature spells mana value 3 or X by 3 or less by paying energy rather than their mana costs. If you cast spells this way, you can cast them as though they had flash.
This is a quick one of those examples where they just gave you a worse version of Alluring.
Worse Alluring,
yeah. This is one-sided. Your opponent doesn't also get this effect. So where Alluring is symmetrical, this is not. Yeah. But Alluring doesn't have the bottleneck of needing an additional resource in order to convert. You just get to go off. So I can't imagine a world where anybody who would ever look at this card wouldn't just pick up Alluring.
I agree. I think
if the best version of Alluring becomes the Guide of Souls energy variation, then I could see, okay, if the actual best version of Alluring itself is leaning into that energy package, then okay, Primal Prayers just becomes the better version of that. That way, you're not giving your opponent the symmetrical effect. But that seems crazy to me. Like,
it's a lot of hoops.
Would it ever be? Yeah. There's a lot of hoops. I mean, only in the world where Guide of Souls combo, like Primal Prayers Guide of Souls combo, is actually the best version of Alluring. Will we see this play?
So, otherwise, Phil, something somebody pointed out: Guide of Souls does not give you energy when it comes into play.
Yeah. I mean, here's my defense to not understanding how cards work. Okay,
there are too many effing words on that card.
No, there's not too many words on that card. But that card's a creature. Why would I ever have it anywhere near me?
Fair enough.
Get it away from me.
Yep. Eternal Durdles is proud to be sponsored by Moxfield.com. Moxfield is the best deck building website on the internet. You can find all of my and Phil's decks in links below, including decks from this episode. And if you do, you'll be directly supporting the channel. All right, speaking of creatures, how about 6 for... I hate the fact that 6 costs 3. 6 is 2 and 1 green for a legendary creature tree folk. It has reach. It's a 2/4. Whenever 6 attacks, mill 3 cards. You may put a land card from among them onto the battlefield. As long as it's your turn, non-land permanents in your graveyard have retrace. I mentioned this card because I think Dukes and Strass will be pretty psyched to try this card out. Again, I just hate the flavor fail of it, like not being like, look, it doesn't have to cost 6. I get that, but like, why not mill 6 cards? Come on.
I mean, 2 plus 4 is 6. You know, it costs 3 and it mills 3. That's 6. You just have to do some addition. You gotta just do
mental
some math,
gymnastics.
my dude.
All right.
Just do some math, bro.
But I'd like to see if the Green Suns fam has anything to say about this card, because it is interesting. Like non-land permanents in your graveyard have retrace, so that means you're getting back a lot of value, especially if you've been drawing lands that you don't need. You can attack with 6 and be like, okay, here's my Knight of the Reliquary, who is also just grown because I've thrown a land in the yard. Beyond that, like, man, I barely even deal with green creatures, so I don't have a whole lot to say.
Okay.
This does have
I'm
infect.
going to preface by getting over the. I'm going to get past the bottleneck here of. This is a 3-mana creature that doesn't do anything upon ETB. That we exist in a grief beanstalk world. Looking past the fact that we're in a grief beanstalk world, in which case, a fair deck can never actually functionally be viable at the top of the competitive tables. Looking past that, this card fucks. This card's great. I mean, it's a 2/4 that with reach, so it lines up against the Delver decks of the world. Mill 3, put a land from among them into your hand is just like, okay, there's some amount of value between the mill and you go up a card every time it attacks. But then the upside of being able to just turn your, having retrace, turning all of your lands into regrows is really powerful. I mean, you can go from anywhere between, you were talking about how Sylvan Library still sees some play. Well, if you're playing 6 in your deck, then you still believe that Sylvan Library is a playable card in the world of our Lord 2024.
And you can put it into play with that land that you got.
You can put it into play, and then you can attack and clear the top 3 when you need to clear the top 3. So you can look at the next cards.
Look at that.
If you want to look at but I mean, obviously Loam makes it so you always have retrace fodder, which is pretty sweet. One thing that to think about too is non-land permanent cards in your graveyard have retrace, and that means that you can you cast it, right? Mm-hmm. So if you are playing with something like any of the baubles, like you can go, if you have this, you can go bauble, retrace it, bauble, every card, and turn every land into a card draw, which is kind of sweet, right? So
you can cast Green Sun Zenith for as well, which is pretty nice. Like
this is off of Green Sun Zenith, yeah.
I'm saying like you could retrace Green Sun Zenith. They're non-land permanents. Non-land permanents. Okay, my bad.
But also, Green Sun Zenith will likely go back into your deck unless it was countered anyway.
This
so that's
is true. Why would I try and get it?
Yeah, but like
I'm wrong on so many levels.
I think that like the idea that in a way, this card being in play just means that every land puts your graveyard into your hand is really powerful, because the thing that is sort of not necessarily at face value recognized for how powerful that actually is if this is in play, it means that every top deck theoretically is any card in your graveyard. Yeah. Which is really powerful when you think about that, like in the aggregate. So I'm a believer that this card absolutely slaps. I just think we're in a world where 3-mana cards that are looking for the game to go any further than turn 4 are absolutely nonsensically unplayable. Yeah. But
until Delver is good again, Delver is top tier. 6 is going to remain tier 3 or below.
Yeah, if at any point the format is course corrected somehow, like if you are somebody who has a Green Sun Zenith in your grip at any point, like you should have a 6 somewhere in your collection, if not more than one.
All right, going on to Sowing Mycospawn for 3 and a green. This has Devoid, and it has Kicker of 1 and a colorless. It is a 3/3. When you cast this spell, search your library for a land card, put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. When you cast this spell, if it was kicked, exile target land. So I mentioned this card. Now I know why I was talking about the card above with Discover. Is these two cards make it so that like maybe you want green to be the like splash color, but also like this card by itself is like fine in Cloud Post if you can produce the green mana off of like a Yavimaya. Like you're getting a land, you're killing one of their lands. Like I can see this as like a fine, like I know it says that is a 6 mana play, but when you're Cloud Post, that's like a 3 mana play.
Yeah, it is. It's just like it's just going to be competing for all of the slots of like, okay, if your deck has already accomplished the thing that it wants to do, which is get enough mana to cast anything that is just like overwhelmingly too strong for your opponent to recover from, it sort of feels like it falls into that space. But I mean, maybe it's just like right at the curve topper where it's like more reasonable to do than anything else. It won't be me, but
also it's a 3 mana 3/3. It's a 4 mana 3/3 that ramps. You know, if that's what you want,
it might be the bridge. Yeah, it might be the bridge.
All right. Thief of Existence is a.
Oh wait, hold on. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I'm just like going back and reading Sowing Mycospawn one more time and realizing that the first ability is not also if you kick it, it's just the ability.
Yeah, that's just the ability. You just get to do it.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. No, okay. I'm a lot higher on it for that type of deck then, as like, you know, half of your Primeval Titan for 4 mana instead of 6.
Yeah. This is
okay. Yeah. I take that all back. I'm like, I get that this is powerful and that like if you kick it, being able to remove a land is like super sweet. You set your opponent back like a fuckload, but like it just being a 4 mana version of half of Primeval Titan is worth it in that regard to me. Yeah. And yeah, for sure. That just being another cheap, non-killable, or like non-killable way to like tutor your card. So instead of needing like your Elvish Reclaimer or you know, I don't know if any other creature that would like search if they were doing that, but like being able to just tutor up a land on cast, which means that it's not like, you know, it can get countered. Like you're still going to get that land no matter what. That it's essentially 4-man tutor for a land. I thought it was you get the things if it was kicked. I misread it the first time around. No.
This might even be playable in lands. You know, like as like I've got like 2 of these in my deck, and I'm just gonna like I'll go get Dark Depths. Like you can't even counter.
Yeah.
You know,
I actually would argue that if you were playing lands, that you'd probably be more interested in looking at 6 than you would at Sowing Mycospawn.
I agree. I think both these cards would be interesting to include, or at least to consider in lands.
Yeah, we're calling this segment. Finally, we understand what the cards do. And yeah, Sowing Mycospawn for sure is the real thing.
Yeah. All right. Thief of Existence is 1 generic, 1 colorless, and 1 green for a 3/4 Eldrazi with the Void. It says when you cast this spell, exile to 1 target non-creature, non-land, and opponent controls with mana value of 4 or less. If you do, Thief of Existence gains when this leaves the battlefield, target opponent draws a card. So it's kind of like a slightly smaller version of Thought Knot Seer that like hits a permanent. It's like a non-creature permanent, right? It's non-creature, non-land. Yeah. So again, this is like in that realm of like if the Eldrazi deck wants to play a color, I feel like green is going to be the color it wants to play.
Yeah, this thing is it is more closer to me as like the Eldrazi Skyclave apparition.
Yeah.
Because the effect of what it's doing is Skyclave apparition, but instead of giving them a body on the back end, it lets them draw a card, which, you know, depending on the deck that you're playing might actually be better if you're, you know, chunking with 3/4, that like them drawing a card that they may not have time to deploy is better than putting a body in the way that can tussle. Yeah. So that's not nothing. Also, the mana cost is pretty deceptive. If you're playing this in Eldrazi where you're playing soul lands, this actually just reads soul land mana plus green, you know?
Yeah. Or it could even read, well, I guess it doesn't read. I have to remember what Ugin's Nexus or whatever that card is. Eye of Ugin. Eye of Ugin won't let you play this for just having like an Eye of Ugin and a like a Yavimaya in play. But this card, I feel like if there's a color that like compare with the Eldrazi stuff, it's either going to be blue or it's going to be green. And I think that's the draft archetype too. I think Simic Eldrazi is like a draft archetype for this set. So I guess that makes sense. If you look at the next card, like not the next card, but like 2 cards over, Hunted Wumpus is just a 6/6 that if you spent colorless mana, your opponent doesn't get to put a creature from their hand into play. Otherwise, it's just a 6/6 with trample. So it's
Yeah,
kind of the same thing.
Yeah, I just want I do think that like if the like new Eldrazi, like the new Thought Not Seer Reality Smasher, like whatever the updated version of that deck is, that it's not like that deck is unable to make colored mana between Cavern of Souls and like any of the fast mana that it plays. And obviously we were talking about how Elvish Spirit Guide is still something that they would play in slots because they used to play that kind of mana acceleration too. Yeah. And the fact that like the one generic and one colorless still does work with all of the soul lands. Like that requirement is filled. It's just sort of misleading visually. So if that deck does exist, I sort of do see this as being like a very meaningful player in that space because it does mean that it's effectively a 2-mana 3/4 with your soul land. And your Cavern of Souls can get through and make this thing the color. And then this just being able to clear everything that your opponent was doing before they even got to that space, unless they were doing something that was like fast mana busted. So I do think that like if that deck does exist, that this card will be a part of that shell and is enough of a reason to skew towards green, enough that you would be like, okay, Elvish Spirit Guide's getting the nod as opposed to anything else. And, if there was a reason to play a basic that's not wastes, you would just play the basic forest.
Yeah.
Because also that also means that you get shit like Boseiju too. Now, I don't know if that deck would ever want something like that, but you get the other tools that are in green that are really good for what I imagine that deck would like have to fight over, which is like, being able to destroy like the weird troublesome stuff that right, exactly, like the stuff that would otherwise stop the fact that you're just like chunky beaters.
It was really funny. I was talking about Teferi's Moat a couple episodes ago, but that only deals with creature you choose a color.
yeah, it's not quite it.
Not good with the void creatures.
Not good against the yeah. You cast Teferi's Moat against your Eldrazi opponent, and they go, that resolves.
Yeah. Or they look at their hand and they go, man, it's a real bummer that I couldn't kill this with my Thief of Existence.
Or I was gonna say, or like I play a Teferi's Moat, you play Thief of Existence, but I'll be like, all right, green, and then we'll both be reminded what Devoid does.
Yeah, of course. All right, final card for this episode is, of course, the double-sided Planeswalker. Grist, Voracious Larva is a 1-mana 1/2 with Death Touch. Hey, look at you getting around Orcish Bowmaster's Grist. Whenever Grist, Voracious Larva, or another creature enters the battlefield under your control, if it entered from your graveyard or you cast it from your graveyard, you may pay 1 green. If you do flip Grist, the flipped version of Grist is a 3 loyalty Planeswalker. -1 is create a black insect creature with mill 2 cards.
Plus one.
Oh my gosh, it's a +1. Is create a black insect creature and then mill 2 cards. Put a Death Touch counter on the token if a black card was milled this way. -2 is destroy target artifact or enchantment. And -6 is for each creature in your graveyard, create a creature token that's a copy, except it's a 1/1 black and green insect. This one, to me, is the one that I think is the most likely to have the correct color with it, so that you get that bonus of a Death Touch counter.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that, it's got that going for it. I don't hate this card. I don't want to play it myself, not my style. But this feels like if you're in that style of deck, like that, like Cradle Control kind of deck, like you'd be okay playing this.
I was also thinking that, what's a way to get another reasonable thing that we were doing that isn't just like Gravecrawler shenanigans, right? Because that stuff sucks. But, we just talked about 6 in your Green Sun Zenith deck, and you can retrace a creature out of your yard for, just by pitching whatever, and then, kick it for green.
Boom,
and then
Grist comes to pay, you pay the green, you flip it over, and it's a Planeswalker.
That's not nothing, and, this is a 1/2 that has Death Touch, so if there is anything in the format that this thing just sits in front of, like, you're happy to, like, stall the ground if that's meaningful in any way. I don't know that it is, but there's one thing. The biggest draw, or the biggest takeaway to me on this card is that Bowmaster is so much of Bowmaster is so much of a toxin on the format that they have to start looking at everything
has to be a Squire. Yeah.
So now everything has to be a Squire. So like their behavior in design has to change because one card exists. And that makes me think, is that one card existing even worth it, or should you just get rid of it and then print a version that doesn't make it so that your design has to be sculpted around it?
Inquiring minds want to know.
I don't know if the trade-off of that card existing means that you have to now look at everything through the same lens, because it's also very obvious that in this set that they were very conscious of Lightning Bolt. There are so many X-Force.
A lot of X-Force,
like, and X-Force for stuff that like doesn't or shouldn't need the additional butt for the rate that it's already at. Like a lot of 3 mana 3/4s. There was the 2 mana 1/4. Like just a lot of just excess toughness to like honor these things that otherwise are the constraints of the format. But it's interesting now that it's like exactly 2, exactly 4. And if you see 2, it's because they had to pay attention to Bowmaster. And if you see 4 in a way where you're like, does it need that extra toughness? Is that toughness like doing anything for it? That it's, a nod to Lightning Bolt. So, I mean, haters gonna hate, but
yeah, man, dies to Doomblade still though.
Wow, dies to Doomblade.
Yeah. All right. Well, I mean, I don't have much more to say about this card aside from that. Like, if you're that kind of deck that wants that value, like, sure, like putting a bunch of creatures from your graveyard after you've gotten this thing to 6 loyalty, maybe you get like 4 or 5 creatures off it that are 1/1s. Neat. But beyond that, like I'm not impressed by this card. But again, I think this will see some amount of play.
Yeah, I mean, I think that like if you think about like all of the stuff that's going on the backside, like you invested 1 mana, and then if you did the incidental thing, like I don't think you're going out of your way to be like, I am going to flip Grist. I think you're like, all right, this is playable, and then if I happen to flip Grist, okay. Now that means that you have to be interested in the Death Touch side, because if the +1, like if you're doing the incidental back half of this card that does flip it, then that means that you have to be interested in the Death Touch for 1, which means that there has to be enough of a reason that you would just want to wait.
Necrogoyf is that reason, Phil. Necrogoyf is the reason.
If Necrogoyf starts seeing enough, that would be enough reason. But everything else in the format has evasion, so like I don't expect Grist to show up in any meaningful way. If it does, it'll show up in the cute decks. It is still a green creature, which means that like at any point you can just pay 2 mana with a Green Sun Zenith and you have access to this card. So if you're in a Green Sun Zenith deck, you actively have 5 copies of it. So like maybe there's a world where it's more reasonable. But even then, at that point, you also have to think, okay, why aren't I just playing with the actual factual Grist, which is doing a lot of similar things?
You probably are. I would say a deck
that
that wants this wants to play the other one too.
Yeah, probably you just have both as one-ofs. Eventually, you just become the full toolbox. I mean, the other thing about this, though, is that this is a creature, and why would I ever?
Why would you? All right, well, that's it for all of the green cards from Modern Horizons 3. Thank you all for watching. If you get a chance, please like this video, subscribe to the channel if you can, and hey, if you can support us on Patreon, we'd love that. Go to patreon.com/EternalDurdles. That's it for green. Thanks so much for watching. Before you go, I need some help. Please subscribe to this channel and do your part to help sustain the legacy content ecosystem. Just subscribing to this channel goes a long way to reminding YouTube that people love and support this format. Now, if you really want to go the extra mile, you should think about supporting us through Patreon. Both the links for subscription and Patreon are right here. And if you're listening on an audio format, you can go to patreon.com/EternalDurdles. Thanks so much for watching.